Nowadays, there are a lot of popular fad diets out there, and it can be difficult to know what's right from what's wrong. So in this video, I thought I would talk you through some of the popular diets, namely the paleo diet and the ketogenic diet, explain the myths and the truths behind them, whilst also giving you some practical tips on how to spot a fad diet so that you don't fall for these trends, because chances are there's going to be new ones popping up all the time. And then I will finish off by telling you what actually works when it comes to weight loss. So you've probably heard about the many popular diets that claim to speed up weight loss. You've got the keto diet, paleo diet, the Atkins diet, gluten-free diet, low carb, low fat, intermittent fasting. So does any of it work? Well, the truth is there is no single optimal diet for fat loss. This is actually good news because it means there are a number of ways that we can successfully set up a fat loss diet. Time and time again, research has demonstrated that all popular diets work in the same way, and that is by creating a calorie deficit. So the first step is to stop looking for a diet because you already have one. The word diet simply refers to a way of eating. Now, everyone watching this video is eating something because at some point, if you didn't eat any food, you would not be alive. So rather than looking for a new diet, you should look to your current diet and see what may need changing. In order for a diet to be successful for fat loss, it must act on the metabolically relevant components. So your body weight is regulated by energy balance, which concerns the amount of energy that you're consuming and the amount of energy that you are expending. The total number of calories that you expend in a day is referred to as your total daily energy expenditure. So I've done a whole video on metabolism and the different components that go into it, so you can watch that one too. But the main thing to note is that your metabolic rate isn't the only thing that contributes to the number of calories that you burn in a day. So you also have calories burnt digesting food, and then calories expended during physical activity, whether that's formal exercise or just moving around, walking, day-to-day activities like that. So you can see how energy needs may vary from individual to individual because some people are far more active than others. So to reiterate, in order to lose body fat, you must be consuming fewer calories than you're expending. So any nutritional approach that you take must act on the metabolically relevant factors that affect energy balance. So our primary focus should be on enhancing satiety and reducing the energy density of the diet, as this will be the most effective way to manage your calorie intake. So whilst a negative calorie balance is the mechanism behind which fat loss occurs, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to track your calories in order to lose weight. Having said that, I do think it's beneficial for the majority of people to track their food intake for a period of time. It doesn't have to be the first change that you make, and lifestyle modification should definitely be put in place first, with an emphasis on adopting more beneficial behaviours such as an increase in activity and nutrient density of the diet. But I do think there is merit to tracking your intake for a period of time just to learn a little bit more about portion sizes, although some people are definitely better suited to it than others, and it can help to have an experienced coach to take you through the process. So let's address the popular diet. If a number of approaches work, why is Karen telling me that I should be going keto? And why should I be making paleo pancakes and eating gluten-free cardboard toast? There are a number of things driving these claims, and unfortunately it's not scientific evidence. The belief that these diets promote weight loss has emerged more from personal impressions and reports published in books and anecdotes rather than being grounded in scientific research. Popular diets work in one of three ways. One thing you'll commonly see is the manipulation of macronutrient content, such as a low carb diet or a low fat approach. The other thing we'll see is a restriction of specific foods or food groups, such as within the paleo diet. Or these diets may work by manipulating the timing of your food intake, such as through intermittent fasting. And there is nothing really special or more beneficial about any of these approaches. So I'm going to choose a few of the popular ones to explain a little bit further. The ketogenic diet derives around 70% of its energy from fat. There is a moderate to low consumption of protein, and carbohydrates are severely restricted to the extent where you could pretty much say it's a zero carb diet. This is to mimic a fasting state and induce ketosis. Now, the interesting thing about the ketogenic diet is that it was actually introduced around 100 years ago in order to treat epilepsy, and it was typically implemented under strict medical supervision. Nowadays, it is claimed to promote weight loss and help to reduce your hunger and your appetite. You are allowed to eat small amounts of meat, fish, eggs, and seafood, and there is an emphasis on fat, so lots of avocado, lots of olive oil, coconuts, butter, nuts, cheese. There's limited vegetables because starchy vegetables are excluded. Fruit is often not allowed. There is no dairy and there are no grains either. So the rationale behind the ketogenic diet is that we reduce our carbohydrate intake to induce ketosis. Carbohydrates are the preferred source of energy, so when we don't eat them, our body has to find another way. Ketosis is simply a metabolic process by which we utilize fats for energy by using ketones as a fuel source. However, just because we can metabolize something doesn't mean that we should. For example, the ethanol in alcohol can also be used for energy, but I don't really see anyone recommending that diet. It's like putting a meal together with the leftovers in the fridge. It wasn't really what you wanted, but it got the job done. So one really important distinction to make is that there is a difference between the dietary fats that you're putting into your body, in the form of avocado or eggs, and body fat that is stored on the body. All ketosis does is turn the food into energy. Doesn't necessarily affect your fat stores. The type of energy that you're putting into your body won't make a difference to your fat stores if you're not putting in less energy overall. So does the ketogenic diet work? Well, if it helps to put you in a calorie deficit, then you will see some weight loss. One thing to note is that short-term reductions in body weight are common because you're eating less carbohydrates. When we do eat carbohydrates, they're stored as glycogen in the body, and for every 1 gram of glycogen, 3 grams of water are stored. So if you suddenly eliminate all carbohydrates from the diet, you're going to drop a lot of water weight. But water weight is not fat, and it's just going to come straight back when you begin eating a regular diet again. Not to mention, there's not a lot of evidence looking at the long-term effects on overall health and weight loss outcomes. One criticism of the ketogenic diet is that it's high in saturated fat, because you do see the encouragement of a high consumption of things like coconut oil and butter. And we also see constipation, moodiness, and it can be unsustainable in the long run if it's difficult to stick to. So the keto diets rely on extreme techniques to temporarily move the scale down a few pounds, and it basically eliminates all joy associated with eating food and just living a normal life, because it can make it very hard to participate in social occasions and for people to spend time with you. It's like saying, would you take a certain drug that may not be safe, it may not work long term, it may only work temporarily, and it could cause damage in other ways? The answer would probably be no. So one thing you'll typically hear from proponents of the ketogenic diet is reference to the carbohydrate insulin model of obesity. And this is the idea that carbohydrates elevate insulin secretion, and as a result, fat is directly stored on the body. Sure, it's true that carbohydrates raise insulin, but increased insulin levels do not lead to increased fat gain. It's important to remember that your body is pretty complex. Insulin doesn't act alone, and it's your brain, not a single hormone, that governs weight regulation. Also, when we look at clinical trials comparing low-carb diets to low-fat diets, when protein is controlled, we see similar outcomes in terms of weight loss, and the evidence even slightly favours a lower fat approach than a lower carb approach. We see meta-analysis that conclude that energy expenditure with a low-fat diet is actually more significant when it's compared to a low carb diet. Also, if you exercise regularly and you severely restrict your carbohydrate intake, then this can have some pretty negative consequences. You'll probably feel crappy, probably have low energy, you might even get sick, your workouts will probably suffer, and in the long run you may not even end up losing any weight. So to take away from the discussion around the ketogenic diet, the main thing is that insulin isn't bad. It's actually an anabolic hormone, and we need it in order to create a muscle building environment. Not to mention that consuming protein also raises our insulin levels. Fat can still be stored even when insulin levels are low. Often higher insulin responses are correlated with increased satiety as well, which is favourable if your goal is to lose weight. And even when stratified by insulin sensitivity, there is not anyone out there who doesn't lose weight eating carbs when they're in a calorie deficit. So when you consider that the ketogenic diet isn't any more beneficial for fat loss compared to other calorie controlled methods, and that it's also fairly restrictive, it makes you wonder whether or not it's really worth it. On to the paleo diet then, and this one is a bit of a funny one. So the paleo diet attempts to mimic the food groups of our pre-agricultural ancestors who were living in hunter-gatherer times. It's based on the premise that we adapted to eating certain kinds of foods. According to proponents of the paleo diet, profound changes in diet and other lifestyle conditions after the introduction of agriculture over 10,000 4,000 years ago have been too recent on an evolutionary timescale for an adjustment of the human genome. In order to avoid chronic disease, we should be eating like our ancestors. Apparently. This diet claims to optimize health and aid in weight loss. So on the paleo diet, you can eat meat, fish, eggs, healthy oils, fresh fruit and vegetables. Cereal grains, legumes, dairy, and other heavily processed and refined products are excluded from the diet. Now, some criticisms of the paleo diet, and this is why I kind of think it's quite funny, is that the diet itself doesn't necessarily reflect what our ancestors were eating back in the day. So there were a variety of hunter-gatherer diets consumed by different tribes back in the Paleolithic era. These foraging diets were diverse simply because what people ate depended on where they were living. The paleo diet also assumes that our ancestors were the epitome of health, that they didn't die from infections, and that when they switched to a more modern day diet, that their health declined. So what is the truth? Whilst it is true that diseases of affluence like obesity, diabetes and cardiovascular diseases have increased over the past 50 years in industrialized countries like the US or Australia or the UK, because industrialization has changed the way that we live and the way that we eat. Our modern day diets are rich in refined sugars, starches, high in fat and sodium. So we should definitely include some aspects of the paleo diet if we want to be healthier, like a focus on minimally processed whole foods and consuming a variety of nutrients with an adequate amount of protein. We do not necessarily have to follow the strict paleo rules in order to eat a healthier diet. So one funny thing is that most modern fruits and vegetables are not actually like the ones that our ancestors were eating. Early fruits and vegetables were much bitter, smaller, tougher to harvest, and sometimes even toxic. So we've bred and cultivated plants over time to produce larger and more diverse yields of bigger and sweeter crops. The point is, what we get now is different to what we had back then. So it doesn't even make sense to be talking about a paleo way of eating. Proponents of the paleo diet argue that our ancestors couldn't have eaten grains, dairy or legumes, yet recent studies have discovered that ancient humans may have begun eating grasses and cereals before the Paleolithic era even began. And a 2009 review actually revealed that our paleo ancestors did eat legumes, and these are actually an important part of their diet. Also, eating whole grains and legumes is really healthy for us. We see improvement in blood lipid, better blood glucose control, less inflammation and a lower risk of stroke and coronary heart disease. Finally, and this is kind of a rule that applies to most popular diets, is that strictly following a list of foods that are good or bad, allowed or not allowed, often leads to many problems. It can be hard to adhere to, it creates restrictive food behaviours, and just isn't a very nice way to live your life. It's time to forget about the caveman fallacy. Last time I checked, evolution was a pretty helpful thing. Golden rules of any dietary approach when it comes to losing fat is that you must somehow create an energy deficit, but also it should be comprised of nutrient-dense foods that you enjoy eating, because adherence is what's going to be the biggest predictor of success long-term. Like I said, it's likely that there's going to be many bad diets popping up, so here is a checklist of some red flags that you can look out for to protect yourself against the next fad, because chances are it's going to sound fairly scientific and it's going to be difficult to be able to pinpoint fact from fiction. So here is the checklist. Does the diet have an aim? Does it promise a quick fix? Does it restrict entire foods or food groups? Are there rigid rules and restrictions? Does it use buzzwords that are laden with emotions such as fast, cleanse, quick or skinny? Does it suggest that foods or food groups can change your body chemistry, pH levels or alkalize you? Does it offer any other solutions to reaching your goals, or is their way the only way and the best way that you should be eating? Does it market specific products like keto peanut butter cups or paleo bars? Does it lack scientific evidence, and is it grounded in anecdotes? So, this is what helped me to lose weight, so this is the answer for you too, because we know it doesn't work like that. And does it sound too good to be true? Something that's really important to consider is whether the approach is sustainable for you for the length of time necessary it takes to reach your goals. So if you go from adopting a ketogenic diet, you see some weight loss, and then you suddenly revert back to your usual way of eating, then the chances are you're not going to maintain your results long term. So you need to find an approach that is more sustainable, and that often comes from having less rigid rules and restrictions. Focus on eating a nutrient-dense diet, so lots of fruits and vegetables. We do see benefits to a higher protein intake as well, because it acts on those metabolically relevant factors that I mentioned earlier, so it helps with satiety and increasing energy expenditure. But also don't let your diet make you miserable, because the chances are it won't work long term. Losing fat is not something you want to be trying to do forever. You want to lose it, and once you've lost it, you want to keep the fat off. So you don't do anything dramatic and don't fall for the fads. Hopefully this video was helpful. I want to thank you guys for watching. If you did enjoy the video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and you can check out the description box for some of the other cool things that we've got going on, along with links to our social media channels like Instagram and Facebook. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.